Alright, so first of all, thanks a lot to Rock the Speaker Box for sending me their latest library called Overkill, which, as the name already suggests, is mainly about Gore sound effects. Again, they have 3 different sections. The construction kit here. And also the building blocks. And then finally, of course, also a design section. I'm mainly going to be focusing on the construction kit, of course, today. And I mainly want to talk about an approach that I like to use to make these rather organic, raw-sounding foley recordings more cinematic, because that's something that you often have to do when you're working, for example, with trailer publishers. You're supposed to make different versions of your sound, and especially when it's this kind of enhanced foley, then you need to find a good way to trailerize these rather raw recordings. So I'm just going to start by creating more or less, I think, an impact sound. So I want to jump right into it. I'm going to start with something for the tail, so this blood drip stuff sounds appealing for this. Yeah, something like this, which has a nice tail. Not sure if I want it that long. We can change this later. Bone break sounds good as well. And as you can see, they always have, I think, 6 versions of each sound. So you always have a lot of variations to choose from. Just leave it like that. And then maybe something else for the texture. This one could work. Just not sure how much of this I want in the tail. Alright, so this is more our textural layer, and now I want something with a bit more punch to add on to this, as this is more for the tail, and now we need to create the actual impact. Yeah, something like this could work. I think in this case, let's just use the second one here. Let's not use this. Yeah, maybe like that. And then I think let's also use some weapon sounds. More as a whoosh into this. So let's put this a bit more in front. I want more impact, so maybe go back to the bone break. That's gonna have stuff with some nice transients there. By the way, if you're actually doing this to image, obviously you want to pay attention to what's happening in the image. So if there is no bones breaking, then maybe don't use sounds that indicate that bones are breaking and stuff like this. And then I want more of the whoosh stuff. Just a classic whoosh, more or less. So let's just use that one. And then maybe some final impacts. Yeah, something like this. Let's just process this together a bit. Just a bit of saturation for the high end here. Transient shaping, just the trans X here. And I also like layering transient shapers. And then for some more aggressive processing, I like to use Orion. EQ this a bit. So now we have our basic, more raw and organic sound. And now I think a lot of people, if they now had to create a cinematic version of this, or, you know, a trailerized version, what we'll do, I think, is just grab a reverb. And then call it a day, pretty much. Obviously, this can work. I mean, the question always is, how much value are you really providing? Because this a lot of people can do, you know. A lot of people can take a sound, throw a reverb on it, and call it a day. Also, a lot of people can just, you know, take a sound, compress it a bit more, distort it, make it a bit louder, or whatever, if they will need to create an enhanced version. So that's always the question, how much value is whatever you're doing really providing if you are adding multiple versions. An approach that I have found works quite well. There's nothing nothing groundbreaking, of course. A lot of people are doing this, I assume. But essentially, if you want to take a sound and make a cinematic or trailerized version of it, you're most likely not going to do this by simply processing the existing sound. You're more likely will have to add more layers to it and different sounds to it. So what I typically would do is I create a separate sound similar to this one with multiple layers, and I can process it on its own, but I'm gonna make it somewhat a cinematic version. So more of a stylized boom, something like this, or a stylized hit. And then you can blend it together with your more raw organic version. And simply by adjusting the volume and by how you mix them together, you can control how much of the cinematic sound is actually going through. And this usually works quite well because then you're not just taking the existing sound, processing it a bit and throwing a reverb on it, but you're actually adding multiple layers. You're making the sound genuinely bigger and more over the top, because that's kind of what's usually expected. The approach is going to be a bit different for this one because I already know that I don't need too much stuff in the tail for this. This is more of something, a whoosh into an impact, but still with these Gore elements so that it kind of still fits with the original sound. So I definitely want to work more with weapon sounds here, because these weapon scrapes, slices, especially when they have a nice ring out, those work quite well for creating versions like this. Yeah, for example, this one. Definitely want to keep this ring in there. And let's see if it's going to be audible in the end. But, you can always compress this and put reverb on it to make it a bit more prominent in the mix. And now I'm also mainly looking for impact sounds, because I know that I want to process these a bit more into booms. So let's go to the bone break section here. Yeah, this one sounds interesting as well. And now for this one, I already know that I want to have some reverb on it. And with these two impact sounds, let's use Enforcer on this one. And then let's also use it on this one. And then let's actually use some reverb on that one. And then also EQ it. And now I want a bit more textural stuff. Again, as I said before, for like the whoosh into this. So let's just grab some flash movement. Sounds promising as well. I like this high-pitched stuff in there. We're just gonna need a few more layers for this. With a bit more low end, so we don't just have this high-pitched stuff in there. Let's use the second one. The movement in there, I think, is a bit better for what we are looking for. Then just another subtle layer here. Okay, and then just glue this together with a bit of reverb. Don't want that much height in there as well. Then group both of these together. And let's just process them quickly. Just use this for a bit of more control down there. So this is the sound on its own. This is the cinematic version, whatever. And then both together. So yeah, obviously you can play around with all of this a lot more, but it's just about showcasing the general approach that I like to use for this. But bottom line is, I think, don't create cinematic versions by just throwing a bunch of reverbs onto an existing sound. You will most likely have to increase the amount of layers and make the sound maybe a bit more complex. And by doing this, I think you are going to provide a lot more value. As I said before, most people will be able to throw reverb onto a sound. If that's the only thing you're doing for your additional variation, then I think it's a bit of a low effort solution essentially. I hope that this was helpful. Just wanted to give you a quick tip into this. Maybe this helps some of you. Let me know if you have any questions. See you in the next one. Take care.